Welcome to a narrated video showing French aircraft that I personally photographed or videoed, mostly at the National Museum of the United States Air Force in Dayton, Ohio, the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, the Smithsonian Udvar-Hazy Center outside of Washington, D.C., and at an air show. Enjoy the video. The first airplane to fly across the English Channel was a Blériot monoplane, like the one displayed at the Air Force Museum. During the early days of World War I, both the French and British used two-seat models for reconnaissance behind enemy lines. Members of the U.S. Air Service sent to France for flight training received their first instructions in Blériots with clipped wings that prevented them from taking off. At full throttle, the trainees bounced across the airfield, learning to control the rudders with their feet. Once they could keep it on a fairly straight course, they advanced to an airplane that could leave the ground. The 1917 French twin-engine Cadron G4 has great significance as an early light bomber and reconnaissance aircraft. Its extensive deployment in these roles make it an especially important early military aircraft. The Cadron was quite reliable, had a good rate of climb, and was pleasant to fly, all characteristics that made it a good training aircraft after its combat effectiveness was reduced. Many Allied pilots received their initial flight training on it. The Smithsonian's Cadron is among the oldest surviving bomber aircraft in the world and one of the very few remaining multi-engine aircraft from this period. During World War I, the French Henriot HD-1 was overshadowed by its contemporary and saw use mostly with Belgian and Italian pilots. After the war, the U.S. Navy converted 10 HD-2 seaplanes into land plane configuration and designated them HD-1s. These HD-1s flew from wooden decks erected atop the gun turrets of the battleship Mississippi, investigating the practicality of operating aircraft from ships. HD-1s, like this example at the Naval Aviation Museum, remained in U.S. Navy inventory into the 1920s. The French SPAD-7, shown here at the Air Force Museum, appeared on the front in both French and British squadrons by the latter part of 1916. The airplane was an immediate success primarily because its structural ruggedness permitted it to dive at high speeds without disintegrating. American volunteers were flying the SPAD-7 in February 1918 at the time they transferred to the U.S. Army Air Service, becoming the 103rd Aero Squadron. Of the slightly more than 5,000 SPAD-7s built, about 189 went to the American Expeditionary Force. The French-built Nieuport 28 became the first fighter airplane flown in combat by pilots of the American Expeditionary Force in World War I. The lightly built Nieuport 28 developed a reputation for shredding its upper wing fabric in a dive, and by the spring of 1918, many considered the Nieuport 28 obsolete. The less maneuverable, but faster and sturdier SPAD-13s began replacing the Nieuport 28 in March 1918. The U.S. Navy acquired the Nieuport, shown here at the Naval Aviation Museum, after the war as part of a test program to launch aircraft from wooden decks built on the gun turrets of battleships. Upon close inspection, it became clear that the Smithsonian's aircraft, shown here, is a composite of several different Nieuport 28s. The SPAD-13 was essentially a larger version of the SPAD-7 with a more powerful engine, and it first flew in 1917. Shown here at the Air Force Museum, the SPAD-13 reached the top speed of 135 miles per hour, about 10 miles per hour faster than the new German fighters. It was armed with two 30-caliber Vickers machine guns mounted above the engine, and the pilot could fire the guns separately or together. By war's end, the U.S. Army Air Service accepted 893 from the French, equipping 15 of the 16 American fighter squadrons. The SPAD-16 was a two-seat version of the very successful single-seat SPAD fighters of World War I, the SPAD-7 and the SPAD-13. It appeared in January 1918, was slightly faster than the SPAD-11, but had a lower ceiling and the same poor handling qualities. It was armed with one fixed, forward-firing Vickers machine gun and one or two Lewis guns on a flexible mount at the rear cockpit. It could carry a total bomb load of 70 kilograms, 154 pounds, under the lower wings. The SPAD-16 in the Smithsonian's collection is significant because of its association with Brigadier General Billy Mitchell. He piloted the SPAD-16 on many observation flights over the front lines during the pivotal battles in the final months of the war. The UGA CM170 Magister is a 1950s French two-seat jet trainer aircraft that is easily recognized by its V-tail. Almost 1,000 were built in France and under license in West Germany, Israel, and Finland. While primarily operated as a trainer aircraft, the Magister was also frequently used in combat as a close air support platform by various operators. After its retirement by the French Air Force, Magisters were purchased by several private owner pilots in the U.S. and have since been operated in the experimental category. This Magister was photographed at the 2011 A Gathering of Eagles airshow in Willoughby, Ohio. I hope you enjoyed this narrated video covering French aircraft that are displayed in the United States, and if you did, a thumbs up would be appreciated.